Hey, Mike, schedule release day. I love it. I think it's a big deal, not just who you play, but when and where you play them. Are you a buyer in that, in the relevancy of schedule release?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in it's not who you play sometimes, but when you play them and how you catch them. And I stole that line. That was an old Hank Stram line. Hank told me that many years ago about everybody makes a big thing about the schedule. Everybody makes a big thing about the schedule, Bayou. But I'm gonna tell you, it's not who you play, but when you play them. And he recalled this story on a Monday night that they played the Raiders on a Monday night game and ended up winning. And he said the next week they played Denver in Denver. He said they got the stew kicked out of them. He said, Denver wasn't at that time a really good team. And he said, they had won a couple games, lost one, but then we catch them. You got to go to Mile High to play them. And he said, man, we stunk it up. And he said, it just popped in my mind that, it's not who we play, it's when we play them.
Mm-hmm.
Play them on a regular deal, or not on a short week and not having to travel, from Oakland, say to Denver, it's a different story. And I do think that does play a part in it. And we've done this so many years where you look at that schedule and you say, man, that's a tough part of the schedule, that 4 or 5 game run. And the Saints sweep that. And so you sometimes gauging a schedule in May is real difficult by anybody. I don't care who you are. It's really hard to gauge. But injuries, travel, the scheduling part of it today, because there's so much of it now. Now, maybe back then it wasn't so much because the Saints didn't have Monday night or Sunday night games or Thursday night games to worry about. Well, not Monday night for sure. But so I think it does matter when you play someone, because you can catch a hot team, but with some injuries, and you can catch a team that's maybe middle of the road, got a little confidence, they win a game, you catch them at home, and then they end up beating you. So I do think it does matter when you play them and the kind of condition they're in when you play them.
What about Mike, something I pointed out, and there's been several leaks today about when teams are going to play. We know the Saints are going to play at Chicago, at Philly, at Denver, and right now it looks like the earliest they'd play any of those is mid-October, so they're likely to be more cold weather games. Is that still a big – it's been a narrative. Do you buy that that's still a big deal for this team, the cold weather games?
Because they've played so few of them, that's always going to be in play. Matt, I mean, how many really bad weather cold games have this team played in the last 5 years?
I mean, Mike, the only one, well, and this was more than 5 years, but the playoff game in Philly in 2013 was a really cold game that they won. But, I mean, Mike, not many,
Not many. And so, you know why every dome team, especially from the South, you're going to get questioned how well you play in there. Because you know what? You haven't been in that venue.
Yeah.
So you're going to get questioned a little bit about it. That game in Seattle last year was sort of awkward because it was cool, it was windy, but you get that wind blowing off the bay and all, and man, it gets you cold pretty quickly. And yet the Saints ended up winning in Seattle without Drew Brees. So again, that wasn't say necessarily a snow game or weather game, but I do believe that it does play. That it does raise a question mark. Only because you haven't been in that venue.
Yeah.
That's the only reason you could say it today, because you can't point to a game, last year, no. You got to start thinking about that. But when, again, anytime a dome team is going to play up north, and that opportunity for that to happen it does raise the point about when you play someone.
Yeah. He's Mike Detillier on Twitter, at Mike Detillier. I do want to get Mike into holes that remain on the Saints roster. We'll delve into that a bit later, but since last we spoke, the Saints did add literally a big defensive lineman in Margus Hunt. Love your reaction to what the Saints did in adding Hunt from the Colts.
Well, he brings you some versatility in that he's basically been a backup most of his career. He's a great athlete. He's been an okay player. One thing he does do really well, block kicks because of his size. He's always had that that mantra about him. He did it at SMU. He's done it in the NFL where, he gets those big long arms up and he's got pretty good leaping skills that he can block that kick. So he brings you some depth along the defensive line. And the fact that he has played both end and tackle is interesting because of the way he's built. You walk up to him and you say, wow, that guy's – there aren't a lot of 6'7", 6'8" guys playing pro football today. And not built like what he is.
Right.
There aren't a lot of those type of guys. So you bring him in for depth. And, again, in a NFC South that is changing now because of one guy. And Saints fans might not like to hear it, but it's the truth. It's because of Brady. You're trying to bring extra heat somewhere because you're going to have to play him twice a year for the next 2 years. And so you got him in at a contract that's favorable, and you're trying to get a little bit more pass rush on a guy that if you let him sit back there and throw the football, you've seen the results, so to speak. So, yeah, I'm all for trying to help in that manner, and Sean has brought it up about defensive line depth and adding some depth along the defensive line. And the multi-position player, you have one already in Mario Edwards Jr., who can do that, who has played both defensive end and defensive tackle. Now you have another one with Hunt. And remember last year, in 1 week, you lost Sheldon Rankins and Margus Davenport to injury. And all in 1 week, real quickly.
Mike, they kept 9. Last thing in the segment, they kept 9 defensive linemen last year.
They keep 9 again.
But Mike, what's so interesting, and I agree with you, are there even spots available? Like, it seems like they're loaded there with their numbers.
They are, but on the other, you can flip it and also say, we're talking about May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there has been no training camp and won't be in any of these OTAs and camp sessions and everything else. So you're not nicked up right now.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, you can say, well, it's tough to make this team if you look at that, but injuries always play a part. It happens to every team. So why wouldn't you want to sort of maybe put a little bit of depth to that? And I always believe in building strength on strength. I think that's a big key to, if it's business, if it's sports, that you build on your strength. And right now you've got a young player they really like at the end position in Carl Granderson. Now, he had no training camp last year. He came in, and he's on the 53-man roster.
Right.
And he was part of a rotation. I think they'd like to have a much longer look at him. The only bad thing about all that is the fact that he, not being able to get him in those sessions certainly hurt him. And he needs a little bit of meat on the bone because he is a real tall, very, very thin guy. But you can see where this football team is trying to build strength on strength. And I got nothing against it. I've always been a big believer in that. You got talent in one spot, keep piling it on, because you know what? Even if you get down to the cut-down situation, you could always use that as capital to get a draft choice for a team that doesn't have that type of depth or strength along the defensive line.
Earlier this week, the LSU Tigers got a commit from 4-star quarterback prospect Garrett Nessmeier, son of Doug Nessmeier, former Saints quarterback. Mike, thoughts on Nussmeier's commitment to LSU?
I saw him in a camp 2 years ago. The first thing, I watched him throw 3 passes, and I told a guy standing next to me, he reminds me of Tommy Hudson.
It's a good comp.
Right off the bat, when I saw him throw, because he's got Tommy's build. Tom's dad actually was my coach at Lockport Junior High School. And so I saw Tom from, when he was a really young kid all the way through at the Central Lafourche, LSU, and into the pros. And he's built just like Tommy is. A similar build, similar throwing motion. Tom had a way of kind of shuffling his feet a little bit and being able to move left and right and get a little bit of time. Tom was a really good athlete. People don't realize how good of a basketball player Tommy was. And went to a basketball camp and found out, I better start playing football full time. Tom will tell you the story. But that's who he reminds me of. He physically is built along the lines of Tommy and has a lot of his game. He's very smart. He finds receivers well, son of a coach. And so he understands, and sometimes people don't get this. Um, Jake Delhomme says it best about when you decide you're going to be a quarterback in this world, you take on those responsibilities. And you also take on the pressures of playing quarterback. And it's different than playing receiver or playing safety or playing fullback or guard. It's totally different. And he understands the pressures that you're going to get a lot more pats on the back and accolades when you win, and when you lose, man, it was the quarterback's fault, man, and we need another quarterback. So you take the good and the bad with it of what happens, and he gets it because of the fact he is the son of a coach and a son of a former quarterback. A lot of competition for Garrett as a player, and you can see that the one thing similar to Tom was the fact that he's going to need to add a little bit of meat on the bone. He is a real thin type guy. And so you're going to have to add a little bit of strength and a little bit of muscle to him. But right off the bat, it didn't take me long. I've seen that guy before. At one time he did. His mother and father still do. They live about a mile from me. I've seen Tom Hodson. And that's who Garrett reminds me of. He reminds me of Tommy Hodson, and just his throwing motion, his ability to find that receiver. He's smart, and he's not being hailed as this athlete that can move around, but he knows how to get away from pressure very, very well. So I'm a little surprised he committed this early, too. I'm going to be honest with you. I sort of thought this may drag on a little bit more with him. Just from people that I had spoke to had told me don't expect a April-May commitment from him. He's going to this may go on into the summer. And I do think LSU's position now is changed from years ago. I always thought he was leaning the LSU way. But one of the things that now has not been the case is that quarterbacks away from Louisiana who had many options and a four-star guy, why am I going to LSU? Why am I going there? It's the Joe Burrow effect.
Yeah.
You start to feel it. You start to see the water coming over the dam a little bit with this. And I've always thought that, Williams kid will go to Oklahoma. I've heard it from enough guys that, he loved LSU, liked LSU, everything else, but he was going to go to OU, and you understand, look what Lincoln Riley has done there. It's been phenomenal, one after the other. But I always thought Garrett would have this a little bit later. And so I just think the LSU effect and the Joe Burrow effect impact on LSU is starting to make waves here. And you see it when look at the options he had to go to if he'd have wanted to go somewhere else. And I think that played a part in him to saying, you know what, I'm gonna do it early. I'm gonna take this off the shelf and I'm ready to roll.
Mike, and I think you started maybe to allude to this, but we're now into the fourth full recruiting cycle for Ed Orgeron. What, if anything, are we learning about a type or a style of quarterback that Coach O is recruiting in this for this program?
You couldn't tell it by the guys he's bringing in. Okay, he brings in Peter Parrish. Okay, who's a smallish quarterback with movement skills. Okay, that's one. You look at the guys they brought in last year.
Huge.
Okay, big, tall quarterbacks that can throw the football. Now, Brad Johnson's son, he's a lefty. All I know is, and watching him throw the ball, one day that guy's going to be a starting quarterback at LSU. I can tell pretty quick. He knows it. And I'll never forget this. Had to be probably when he was a sophomore, and maybe going into his junior year, talking to Archie Manning, and Archie was like, "Man, Brad Johnson's son, he's pretty doggone good." And when Archie sort of tells you that, you sort of put the antenna up. And I remember as soon as he committed to LSU, I remember him texting me, "Boy, LSU got a good one. They got a real good one." And then you see the young man from on the North Shore.
Finley, yeah, TJ Finley.
Yeah, he's built like a defensive end. So you saw the size there, and so it's going to be interesting what happens with him because, boy, he's got a howitzer, and, man, he can throw the football. How well his read and react, I think that's something, the progressions to go through, how well he does with that will be interesting to watch. And that's why, man, losing the spring was terrible because you had them both there. You had that opportunity to give them some reps there, and it just, didn't happen for anybody. But what you see here is that the one thing with Ed, you look at the quarterbacks that, that he helped to recruit at USC, and that is a little bit of a model, I'm telling you. If you look at Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, Matt Castle, Booty, Sanchez, and if you look at that model and sort of place it, I think it's very similar to what you're starting to see here at LSU. A similar type. I want some mobility skills, but I want the pro-style guy that can throw the football accurately from the pocket. Bottom line. You can talk about, I want the guy that can move around the pocket. We all want guys that can move around the pocket. Joe can move around the pocket pretty well.
Sure.
But that wasn't the first thing you read off the resume about Joe Burrow, wasn't it?
No.
That wasn't the first thing, but he showed he could do it. I'm interested in Miles and how well he can kind of move around the pocket a little bit. But when you look at it, if it's Finley, if it's Johnson, if it's Nessmeier now, Miles Brennan, sort of what they all do the same. Throw the ball from the pocket. Throw the ball from the pocket. Listen, if you can't do that, then you can't play quarterback. You can't do it. Even the best guys that can move around, they have that one major trait. You go back, you look at the USC guys, that's what they did, out in Los Angeles. They threw the ball from the pocket. Some of them had a little bit more mobility than the other, but they all sort of were cookie cuttered. They all came almost the same way. Some of them were a little bit taller, whatever, but it all had one trait, that ability to throw the football, and they were pro-style quarterbacks.
Yeah. So Peter Parrish is obviously the outlier. Like,
right. He was sort of the one guy I was like, okay.
Because you didn't sign one the year before. Like, you had to get a quarterback.
Right.
So
somebody there lobbied for Peter. Okay.
Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Always there's an assistant coach that lobbies for a player, and listen, there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes you whiff. You're not going to be 100% on all this. Sometimes you're going to whiff. I think they saw something in Peter in his big play skills, which he did have in high school, his ability to make a big play with his feet and also throwing off the run, because he did that a lot. If you watched him in high school, he was a guy that could sort of measure it and take off and buys a little time, and then he slings it downfield. It's a little bit different. But, again, an assistant coach came there and, Ed, this is who we want. You look at the kickers. You think Ed Orgeron's out there watching kickers and punters? Okay? No, that's Greg McMahon. Come on, Greg is telling him, hey, coach, this is the punter we should get. This is the kicker we should get. And he trusts that Greg has a good eye for it and understands what he wants. It's the same thing at quarterback. He trusts in Steve that, that Slinger's going to tell him, that guy, I think, can play it out. No, you're not going to be 100% on everything, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. That's a specialized position today, and you get to see so much of it, Matt. I think that's the big difference today than maybe years ago with all these camps, 7-on-7s, everything. You've got so much to look at in a player at quarterback and receiver than ever before. Now, you're going to miss. I get it. But, you got a lot of film. You got a lot of look-see. on that pitch and catch part of the game that 12 years ago you wouldn't have had. You wouldn't have had that. But today you do.
The Saints have re-signed wide receiver Austin Carr, and it does kind of nicely dovetail into something I wanted to talk to you about. We talked earlier in the hour about the defensive line and the depth there, but receiver seems to be a spot where there's a virtual lack of viable options. So let's start, Mike, with a reaction to the Saints bringing back Austin Carr. We can talk big picture receiver if and when the Saints get to camp, but re-signing Austin Carr, do you like it?
Well, he's part of the group trying to make the roster, which he's done, last couple years. With Austin, he's been, I'm going to quote somebody else, he's been an all-star in preseason.
Yeah.
He's made a ton of plays in preseason, and then, come the regular season, you rarely see. He has been a special teams guy, so you understand. He understands how to run routes well. Drew has talked about him at the highest level.
Right.
And I think you remember about middle of the preseason last year, man, Drew Brees goes on a little bit of a tangent, since he normally doesn't talk a lot about a player. But he went on and on and on about Austin Carr. What did I tell you? He makes the 53-man roster. Come on, Drew ain't saying that if he's not. That's just the way he is. And so I think Drew feels very comfortable with him at the wide receiver position. But with a huge hole at wide receiver, he wasn't the guy that was going to step in. The guy now is Tre'Quan. He has got to be able to piece it together. He's got to get some confidence. I think that's one of the things in his game that he lacks. He's not a real confident player. He'll have one good game, and the next couple games he's in the witness protection program. You don't see him. You don't know where he's at. Come on, this is year 3. You're not a rookie anymore. You got a lot of pressure on you, and he's a draft choice, and he's a Sean Payton guy. Sean wanted him here and drafted him. He's going to have to step up his game. I think it's the one area where maybe things I think if you were thinking about the draft, you thought probably in the first couple picks they would use that on a receiver. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, it didn't stem out. And don't give me that he's the 5th option and the 6th option. Well, what if Emmanuel Sanders gets hurt? Then what option is he then? You got to think like the coach does, too. You got a 33-year-old Emmanuel Sanders. Or if something happens that Tre'Quan doesn't step up, where's the option then? Okay? Nobody they don't want to answer that. But I think Sean wanted to give Tre'Quan every opportunity to make this team again and to show that he's the guy. I think he's the guy that, man, you're talking about a watch player, whatever part of training camp we're going to get or how we're going to see it and if we see it. But I think he's a guy that's certainly got a lot riding in 2020 because I think that they're sort of banking on him, that he's got to come through. And somewhere along the line, there's going to be an injury that they're going to count on you. How much more of the offense will they throw to Deontay Harris? I do think that's something that intrigues Sean, to use him more as a wide receiver in certain situations, in that wide receiver screen, the bubble screen. You know they're going to use him on the jet sweep stuff, but opening up. So there's a lot of uncertainty at wide receiver. And so, I know it's the catch line of he's the 5th option or the 4th option. Man, all of a sudden you can go from 4 to 2 real quick. Mm-hmm. Have an injury or 2 and see how quickly that happens on this football team. And so wide receiver and cornerback, you just don't have enough of them. Every team I think if you questioned every head coach in the NFL, they would all kind of give you the same thing. Cornerback is probably, if not 1 or 2, on the list of we'd like to have more. Because you're playing 4 corners every game. Every game you can play in them. So you need them. And that's the other area where somebody's going to have to step up, or do you go out and get a veteran player at this point? Now, again, I don't know what type of leverage a Logan Ryan or an Eli Apple has today financially. They don't have much leverage, and they may have to sign a 1-year deal somewhere so they can get back in where they can maybe hit that big payday somewhere down the line. But right now, To me, you never have enough good corners. I think it's on the defensive side of the football. That's real easy. That's where I think Sean would like to get another player. And there's still uncertainty at the wide receiver group. You can say, well, best case scenario this occurs. Yes, you can throw that mantra out there, and it does work. But there's also the point of, well, what happens if you get an injury or two?
Yeah. Mike, what about?
Because you know what
I'm sorry.
happens? It never happens. You lose a guard and a receiver and a linebacker. You know what happens? You lose two receivers and a safety. Man, it's almost like, if somebody has the flu, and you live in a house of five, what's your chances of getting it if you live in that house?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty damn good. You're going to get it.
Mike, to your point, it happened at linebacker to the Saints a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And so you can see where that's still a question area for me is that wide receiver. And the thing about counting on rookies, you can say, well, maybe Adam Troutman might fill that void. But again, this is 2020. We're not talking about 2018 or 2019 where you had the rookie camps, you had the sessions, you had the OTAs. So now Troutman's got to come in their training camp, whatever you're going to have of it, and that's how they're going to kind of shove it to you. It's not going to be teaspoon, man, it's tablespoon, and you're going to have to get out there and do it. The other part of this, and I'm interested once the schedule comes out, that in the last 4 or 5 years, the December schedules have all been littered with NFC South opponents. I bet that changes this year. That's not going to happen.
Oh, really? Why?
I just have a feeling that that's not going to be the case because a lot of those games really didn't have the meaning I think the NFL thought it would. And they want people watching because as we get into December, the weather worsens in the Northeast, and it worsens out in the Midwest, and it worsens out in the Pacific West. Now, we get some nice days here in the South. Every once in a while, you get that blast of real cold, but the weather gets difficult in the Northeast, Midwest, out West. They want people watching. The NFL wants people watching. And so for the last few years, when you looked at that schedule and you saw a ton of NFC South in December, I think that changes this year. And I think they'll mix it around. They want you watching in week 15, 14, 15, 16, 17, because you got the bye week. They want you watching. They want meaningful games or big games into that. And that was something yesterday, because we all thought Brady Breeze, that would be the start of the season. And then all of a sudden yesterday there were reports out west, and John Clayton, who is a respected reporter, he was the first one that said, I think this season, from reports he had got, would be NFC, AFC opponents for the first 4 weeks. And that I can understand that's not correct, but I can understand if the NFL thought that. Watch, and when the schedule comes out, we already know the Saints play the Vikings on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
Watch Kansas City right before it.
Mike, yeah, you said that, and there are reports now that Week 15, December the 20th, Kansas City in the Superdome.
And
that's starting to leak.
Now here's the other thing. What happens before then? Because, man, what you hate is playing these games on the road that are a pain in the Yoctobe.
Yep.
When you got to play back-to-back games in that situation. And I'm just telling you, I think the NFL is all about ratings now. And, man, listen, nobody does it like they do. They are smart with it. A 5-win Carolina team going up against a 10-win Saints team, you ain't got a lot of people watching.
Yeah.
Mahomes against Breeze. The Vikings, and just that history between the Saints, sort of speaking, the Vikings. The Eagles game, which – because of the fact that, the head coaches know one another, the Eagles have been a very competitive team, and what they've done in the NFC East, in that sort of affair, you maybe would throw maybe an Atlanta, into that bunch because, just the dislike between the two cities and everybody involved. But I think that's going to be the one big difference this year, that on a Saints schedule, when you look at it, is that it's not going to be littered with playing Tampa Bay and the Panthers in December all the time. I think you're going to see a little bit different, and I do believe that the NFL, understanding that we're living in a different world, and that these not only the times are different, but because of the weather situations, they want people watching. And I do believe that adding an extra playoff team is going to make it so competitive that, okay, if I was the number 2 seed and I had 13 wins and that other team behind me, they got 11, man, you know what? I maybe take a week off late in the year. That might not be the case anymore. Because now you might be a 12-win team and the other team has 11 wins, and I might not be able to take it. It's going to put a lot more interest late in the year because of the extra playoff and because only one team gets a bye.
Yeah.
And, that to me, man, that's almost a stroke of genius. I don't know who came up with it, but it was a stroke of genius by the NFL to keep everybody watching late in December when there was a lot of ho-hum games. Okay, we get to watch the Patriots. Oh, well, okay, they're the number 1 seed. They won the AFC East. I might watch a little bit of it. That's not going to be the case anymore. And somebody may run away with it, but I would be willing to put dollars to donuts. There ain't going to be a lot of no runaways. It's going to be competitive into the final game because of the seeding and only having one bye. Yeah. And how much people are going to say, man, I want that week off. We're going to play to get that week off.
Mike, let's start with this one from Stephen Mosgrove. Ask Mike, from what we know now, is LSU a possibility for Arch Manning?
I think they're a possibility, but I think he's headed. If you ask me today where I think he goes, I think he's headed to Clemson.
Oh, not Ole Miss. Okay. I certainly would have thought he'd be. I thought he'd be a legacy. Why not?
No, listen. I'm not saying you're wrong. Okay? He asked me. I gave you an opinion.
No, cool.
No, I gave an opinion. I think that, and I don't know anything on the inside, but I'm just taking a look at this and looking around because it's a couple years now before Arch will get into college.
Right.
That I think that LSU's a possibility, but I just a gut feeling I think he ends up at Clemson.
Glenn on Twitter asked Mike if anyone has signed Chase Forcade.
No one has signed him, Chase. I spoke to his dad, and they're still waiting for a phone call. And listen, it was tough. Small college guys took the brunt of it this year of not having that opportunity to work out for the NFL teams.
Very true. Another one on Twitter, Mike says, ask Mike, can Cumberlander make the Saints? Another defensive lineman.
Man, it's going to be tough. If he makes it, it'll be developmental. Put it to you that way. It's going to be tough for him to make that 53-man squad.
Okay. Ask Mike, Tommy Lee, Emmanuel Butler, Loden Jordan, Humphrey, or Hogan, can any of them make the team at wide receiver?
Because he did it last year, I think Little Jordan has a little bit of an edge there. But, man, I want to see more of Emmanuel Butler because, Matt, every day in practice he made a catch that you said, wow, man, that guy really looked good. And he got a lot of praise from Drew Brees. And, we'd see a lot of times in practice, Drew would throw one up and he'd make a great catch, and Drew would run up to him, and talk to him about it. Drew doesn't do that to everybody. Come on. That was unusual. So I think it'll be the competition between those two guys. I can't see Tommy Lee making this team, no.
I agree. Jeremy in the huddle says, ask Mike, is there another name out there the Saints might pursue in free agency? If so, who would it be?
No, I go back to the cornerback spot. If you could get somebody at your price, and right now you're really caught until really training camp. If you're a player, you don't have any leverage, zero at this point. And I just named them off. Logan Ryan, who the Titans just sort of jettisoned. I would not put Eli Apple out of the realm of possibility.
Ask Mike, here's a linebacker question. What about Clay Matthews or Marcus Golden?
I'll pass on both. Man, God bless Clay. Man, he was a heck of a player. I think Clay's the type of guy. He's like Eric Martin. Man, training camp, let somebody else deal with that. I'll sign after the third preseason game with the team. But at this point, no. And I think Clay would feel that way. Why sort of waste this? Training. What does training camp do for him? I mean, he's played enough of this. He doesn't need to go to training camp.
A lot of people, Mike, are asking about Emmanuel Butler and what happened to him last year.
I think you saw the difference between, and it's, 18 years today, the Allen Iverson rant?
Yeah.
Practice. We talking about practice. There's a difference between playing in a real game and practice. There is a difference. Emmanuel Butler showed it last year. He was great in practice. Great. I mean, he made unbelievable plays. Put him in a game, first pass, that what happened to him? Right through his hands.
Dropped it.
Then after that, he runs a couple of bad routes that, and Taysom thought he had him on a play, and he didn't turn his head around quick enough. So you saw a little bit of jitters of a young player putting in front of that crowd, and it happened. So for anybody that says, oh, man, practice, okay, you got your answer. Allen Iverson was right about difference between practice and a game.
Mike, we got less than 30 seconds. Could Fournette help the Saints?
He can help any team, and the reasoning why is he has become so much better as a receiver coming out of the backfield. I think there's only 4 running backs that caught more passes than he did last year. He has shown he can catch it.
He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network as well, at SI. Make sure you read his stuff. Mike D, you the man. We appreciate you as always, man. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, brother.